Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Well, happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and thanks again for tuning in to today's show. Got a couple of advisories out, actually starting tomorrow here for Thompson Pass and actually all the channeled areas and passes of northeast Prince William Sound. It's a wind chill advisory, and look for those wind gusts to start increasing up to 45, 55, and then eventually up to 65 miles per hour or higher. And you could see wind chills down to the 45 below zero, or even come tomorrow night, maybe down to 55 below zero. And that whole pattern will start extending eastward and eventually include the Copper River Delta tomorrow night and on Saturday, and also probably into the North Gulf Coast. And Saturday looking very windy here for the northeast coast on into across the northern panhandle areas, Lynn Canal, the Stevens Passage, in those areas. Looking at yesterday's satellite imagery, quite a band of moisture here pushing northeast, bringing a lot of rain over the panhandle, extending back to the west, southeast wind flow, keeping much of southern Alaska in a rather maritime, milder condition. And this front coming down with the upper level low back up over the Chukchi Sea. You can see that spreading in, basically kind of a chilly air mass over the Bering Sea, but high pressure dominating. And this system here trying to make a push to the northeast, not quite making it. And you'll see today on today's imagery kind of shearing apart, this portion breaking off and streaming up toward Dixon Entrance, and kind of a wave down in this area. So the continuous rain here over the southeast coast this afternoon will continue through tonight, and kind of a cloudy, occasionally rainy condition going on up over the North Gulf Coast, and this western portion just sliding back to the west. Made for a pretty good day here over the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, not bad over the southeast Bering. Offshore flow eventually picked up some moisture. Low clouds, maybe a few flurries here over the Pribilofs, and then over the top of that high, you have some moisture, low-level moisture, spreading clouds into the Yukon Delta with some flurries, and that kind of linking up with a warm front up to the northwest. Otherwise clear, and the areas that clear, or otherwise mostly cloudy with areas of light snow and flurries, but the clearing areas here dropping well below zero, such as Tanana this afternoon. Clear through the Susitna Valley, again some gusty winds, and this colder air starting to edge its way eastward as the upper level low continues to drop off to the south and southeast, and rain changed over to snow at Yakutat this afternoon. And but just to the east there, Lynn Canal seeing winds gusting as high as 50 miles an hour. Skagway still in the 40s, and those south winds at about 35 in that location. On the chart, that first front we saw yesterday already way over into Canada here, but keeping that west-southwest wind flow, a lot of rain continuing today over the southern southeast coast, a little more intermittent, but still pretty cloudy up to the north there. And again, this low over the Northwest Territories and the Yukon, keeping the gradient enough to kick those winds up through Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. And again, this low spreading some colder air now as it tracks a little bit to the east. Actually, some of that cold air just circulating back around and changing the rain to snow at Yakutat. Otherwise, we have this low bringing some snow up to the eastern Brooks Range, all the way out to the coastline there. Some of that extending back still into the Koyukuk Valley, but amounts quite light. And in fact, the winter weather advisories that have been out for the eastern Alaska Range, 40-mile country, have ended now, but they picked up about a foot of snow on the northern slopes of the eastern Alaska Range here, and in that 4 to 6 inch range over the 40-mile country on up to the north. But again, less amounts, more of a flurry condition with some areas of clearing back here to the west. High pressure dominating the Bering Sea, weakening warm front, spreading some light precipitation into St. Lawrence Island, and that's sliding on into the Yukon Delta. and this front really stretching out and just about no effect at all, but there is enough of a gradient here between the high and the low center further to the south, keeping some gusty northeast winds in areas there, but nothing too strong. For tonight, that next system will roll on up to about this position, so rain, some solid rain over the southern southeast coast there, and that'll spread northward. Some of that could be probably in the form of snow there at Yakutat, but with this next one rolling up, that's going to kind of hold the cold air back to the west here. A lot of snow showers over the Gulf of Alaska. High pressure, which is actually at the surface underneath low pressure at 500 millibars, which just signifies a pretty cold air mass. South of the mountains, offshore flow, gusty winds, clear skies, calm wind areas easily falling below zero tonight. Pretty chilly down across Kodiak Island. Areas of snow continuing, but not all that much, maybe 1 or 2 inch additional accumulation, especially over the eastern areas. Clearing out back to the west and colder, remnants of a warm front, keeping conditions a little cloudy and visibility is a little lower up there for St. Lawrence Island. Fair over the western Arctic slope and those areas, but the snow a little more extensive off to the east there, but wind's not all that bad, pretty light actually all the way down the coastline. Northeast 10 to 20 here from the Alaska Peninsula on out to about Atka. This front way out to the west there, staying out there through tomorrow, but watching some pieces of it along the warm front there breaking off and affecting the northern Bering Sea with possible IFR conditions. Otherwise clear and cold again, high pressure here right underneath the upper level low tomorrow. So the flurries continuing along the north slopes of the Alaska Range. Could see some blowing and drifting snow here over the eastern Alaska Range through Isabel Pass. And again, look for those winds to be on the increase through Prince William Sound. Pretty windy today in some areas like Portage, seeing gusts of 50 miles an hour, and Seward, northerlies up to 40. That's going to continue for Friday. The Arctic front now right down into the Gulf of Alaska, south-southeast of Kodiak Island, and that northerly flow should keep all the moisture to the south or in the Gulf, but definitely colder air coming into the northern panhandle tomorrow afternoon. The front moving to about this position as that low center swings into the Yukon. And for Saturday, we now have low pressure just west of Port Alexander. Very tight gradient here. Arctic high building in with pressures of 1,040 millibars right along the border. And this low center right around 1,000 millibars. So we've got about 40 millibars of gradient here. So there should be some pretty strong winds to go along with that. Mostly in the channeled areas though, because aloft the winds are actually from south to north. So that's should make for a band of snow here between the two air masses, with the rain changing to rain and snow mixed over the southern areas, but you never lose that southwest flow for Prince of Wales Island. So the southern areas will be pretty mixed and drier and colder temperatures over the north, definitely windier. Could see gusts possibly as high as 70 miles an hour or more through the channeled areas here back along the North Gulf Coast. And still pretty breezy, but winds have probably maxed out by Saturday afternoon here over south central Alaska. Light winds, cold temperatures up over the interior, high pressure now both at the surface and aloft building in, and we'll have to watch some of that action sneaking into the northwest part of the state with a gale force winds developing for the Bering Strait, Chukchi Sea areas, and becoming very windy on the western Arctic coastal areas with clouds and chance of some light snow. Basically dry over the Bering Sea. Now that frontal boundary edging its way eastward here. A wave should move northward and kick some gales up possibly into the west central Aleutians with a good shot of rain out in that area. Temperatures this afternoon across the southeast coast. The warmest location at 4 p.m. this afternoon was down here at Heidelberg with 43 degrees, about the same over at Ketchikan and Annette. Cooler conditions back to the north there, Elfin Cove at 34, 38 in Juneau, 41 and the south winds at Skagway, 34 Yakutat, 29 both at Middleton Island, Cordova 27, Valdez 21 there at Seward, 11 degrees over at Kenai, and 14 both at Palmer and Anchorage, 0 at Talkeetna. Single numbers across the Copper River Basin, and where there's clouds and flurries, temperatures are near 0, but Fairbanks 3 below, and where it clears out a little bit, 24 below there at Tanana, minus 18, still some flurries reported at Bettles, minus 6 Huslia, Anaktuvuk -4. Temperatures right around 0 for the Arctic coast, and single numbers here for the Kotzebue Sound area, with Shishmaref at 10, Selawik -8, 1 degree above at Golovin, 1 below at Nome, 21 out at Savunga, and single numbers here through the Kuskokwim Valley, Holy Cross 6, same thing at McGrath, 12 degrees at Iliamna, 13 degrees, 12 degrees King Salmon, and 25 degree reading there at Kodiak with gusty northwest winds, 27 Nelson Lagoon, both False Pass and Cold Bay had 31 degrees, 30 at St. Paul and St. George, and upper 30s here out over the remainder of the Aleutians. And looking at the lows tonight, anywhere from 10 to 20, 25, maybe even 30 below or colder in the areas that clear out over the interior. And with calm winds, anywhere here over southern Alaska could drop down to near 0. Even out toward the coastline, you can see the 0 degree isotherm all the way down into northeast Bristol Bay, then back like this. And 30 degrees, or not falling much more than you already are here out over the Pribilofs, near freezing for Unalaska. Temperatures 30 to mid 40s over the Panhandle, of course warmest in the south. Highs for tomorrow, coldest here over the northern areas, but back into the lower to mid 40s over the southern Panhandle. Out in the Aleutians, upper 30s to lower 40s. Should rise above freezing here for the Pribilofs tomorrow, and those that milder air keeping it near freezing out over St. Lawrence Island, but still pretty chilly. Coldest areas will be over the Tanana Valley, Copper River Basin, actually all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast. Flying weather, not bad here in the west, mostly VFR, but watch for the marginal conditions on the upslope areas of the Alaska Range, or could even possibly be some IFR on the east side there, with marginal VFR all the way up to the Arctic coast. Again, we might run into some IFR. And then this area pushing through, lowest flying conditions over the southern Panhandle, improving back to the north and northwest. Of course, out over the Bering Sea, lots of marginal VFR possible right down to the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Pretty good VFR, and then IFR way out towards Shimia. Passes for Anaktuvuk, IFR gradually becoming marginal tomorrow, but for Adigan should be an IFR day the entire stretch of Friday. Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR conditions, but possibly some marginal VFR in the western entrance. Kind of possibly marginal also for Rainy, and for Windy, marginal VFR. Again, that would be on the north entrance through the pass into the south, VFR. Isabel, occasionally marginal. And Mentasta, lowest conditions on the north entrance, which could be low enough to give you marginal VFR, otherwise pretty good. Tanita, Celine's visibility is unlimited. Same thing for Portage, no clouds at all or restrictions of visibility. And look for an improving trend there, starting out IFR possibly for Chilkoot and White, becoming VFR. Freezing levels ahead of the front here, still from the surface to 2,000 feet over the Panhandle, otherwise all the way down to the bottom here out into the Aleutians. And icing threats, really not much of a threat anywhere here. This batch of moisture will be exiting the Panhandle during the morning hours, so none back to the west, maybe some spotty stuff possible over the central and eastern interior, maybe a little more widespread, but pretty light and isolated even over the eastern North Slope and Arctic coast. No icing expected out here to the west until you get out to the Shimie and Attu area. Winds aloft chart for tomorrow showing big area of upper level high pressure here over the Bering Sea, so those northerly winds up to 90 knots with the upper level low center pulling in toward the Copper River Basin there. Good southwest jet into the southern southeast coast, and that's eventually going to pull that colder air in as that low center slides southeastward into Saturday and Sunday. For tomorrow, the 9,000-foot winds could be as high as 40 knots here crossing the central Alaska or Brooks Range areas. Otherwise, 20 to 30 knot northwesterlies taking a turn to the east and then swinging right into the southeast coast, possibly as high as 50 knots early. Lighter winds with high pressure over the Bering Sea and then becoming southerly, 20 to as high as 50 knots out over the far western areas. And that same pattern seen at 3,000 feet as well. High pressure, light variable winds here over the eastern Bering Sea, right up through the strait there. Low pressure over the Well, near demarcation points, so westerly winds possibly up to 20 knots, 25-knot winds for the Barren Island areas, and easterlies to northeast 20 to 25 right along the Aleutians. And looking at winds from 15 to maybe 30 knots here over the Panhandle, strongest winds there down to the south. And turbulence-wise, look for moderate chop here below 5,000 feet. Could even be severe for small aircraft. Mechanical turbulence, Prince William Sound. And again, these winds increasing, so also the turbulence will be increasing and working its way eastward, not only tomorrow, but through the weekend. Occasional moderate chop up along the Brooks Range there, and then kind of spotty here, mainly over the mountainous terrain below about 8,000 feet over the western interior, but not bad out over the Bering Sea. Maybe a little bumpy, but nothing too serious over the eastern Aleutians. And after the break, Stargazer, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
The celestial sign of winter and the brightest Venus can get.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Plough Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
In case you haven't noticed, winter's coming. Now, for people who live at northerly latitudes like Dean, the temperature change itself is notice enough that winter is on its way.
But for people who live at southerly latitudes like James in Florida, the temperature change is not notice enough of winter's arrival.
Indeed, notice of winter's arrival demands a cosmic change, one that's visible all over the northern hemisphere at this time of the year.
And if you go outside any clear night in early December at 8 p.m., you'll notice the surest sign that winter's coming, no matter what the temperature. Let's show you. Okay, we're facing east any night next week at 8 p.m. Just above the horizon, you'll see 3 evenly spaced stars in a row, flanked by 4 brighter stars. And these mark respectively the belt, shoulders, and knees of Orion the Hunter.
And for the rest of your life, whenever you see Orion just above the horizon at 8 p.m., you'll know that the official beginning of winter, the winter solstice, is only 3 short weeks away.
But if we look into the west after sunset, one special sky goodie is guaranteed, and a second is possible, but definitely not guaranteed. Venus will be the brightest it can get in the evening sky through the middle of December. After the 16th, you'll not see an evening Venus as bright as this for the next 8 years, until the end of November 2021.
The second, not guaranteed, but potentially spectacular thing in the after-sunset sky is Comet Ison. These will be the peak days for spotting this potentially great comet. We're recording this show at the end of August, and at this time, it looks like the comet may put on a great show. If Comet Ison pans out, look to the right of Venus for the tail of Comet Ison peeping above the horizon after it gets dark, but you'll need a dark sky.
What we can guarantee is that on December 4th, a thin 2-day-old crescent moon will be down and to the right of Venus. Then on the 5th, the moon will be closer and above Venus. And then on the 6th, higher still.
If you fail to spot Comet Ison in these evening skies, I suggest you try the pre-dawn eastern sky as well. I know that doesn't sound right, but it is the right thing to do.
And there are other things, astronomical, that just don't feel right to a lot of people. And one of these is how the days feel at the beginning of winter. Now, we all know that the shortest day of the year, the day when there's the least time from sunrise to sunset in the northern hemisphere, is the day of the winter solstice, December 21st. But I've always felt that the days are actually getting a little bit longer by then. They actually seem to lengthen as they approach the solstice. But why?
Astronomically speaking, this feeling can be explained. More people experience sunsets than sunrises, and although the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year at mid-northern latitudes, nevertheless, December 7th feels like the shortest day of the year because it is the day of the earliest sunset at mid-northern latitudes.
So the days do seem to lengthen after December 7th because sunset occurs a little bit later each day. After the solstice, the 21st, until about January 5th, they seem to lengthen more rapidly than they are actually doing because on January 5th, we have the day of the latest sunrise.
Astronomer Guy Otwell puts it very nicely. Remember this sequence. Number 1, earliest sunset, December 7th. Number 2, shortest day, December 21st. Number 3, latest sunrise, January 5th.
So now you know why the days seem so short at the beginning of December. After all, most of us judge the length of the day by the time the sun sets. So what you've been feeling all these years is a correct feeling, even though the reality of the situation is quite different.
Fascinating, isn't it? How we perceive the universe around us? And our pursuit of the knowledge of it is reason enough to always keep looking up.
Welcome back. Well, mostly southwest winds here along the coast, 20 to 30 knots, southeast 25 over the southern interchannels, south, still south at about 25 for Lincoln and Glacier Bay, but that's all going to be changing as early as tomorrow afternoon, especially overnight tomorrow night. And then Saturday, strong storm force winds here through Lincoln and Glacier Bay, definitely possible. Small crafts over the central inside waters. Much colder air resulting in freezing to heavy freezing spray through the northern portion. Low pressure right here, so variable at about 20. Southwest 30 knots coming into the coast of Prince of Wales Island. And for the Kodiak Island area, 35 to 40 knot northwesterlies tomorrow. Storm force winds here, Kamishak Bay right across the Barren Islands. 15 to 20 knot northerlies for Cook Inlet with higher gusts, and small craft advisories here all along the coastal areas up into Prince William Sound. Of course, much higher gusts here in the coming out of the bays from the north and northeast. For Saturday, swinging those winds to a more northeasterly direction up here along the coast on into Cook Inlet. Still seeing those higher gusts, but looking forward to gradually diminish, especially into the afternoon. So the storm force winds will probably come down to about 30 knots here, small craft advisory level for the Barrens back into Kamishak Bay, but freezing to heavy freezing spray just about all of these areas with, again, that'll be expanding its way eastward. And for Bristol Bay, north winds at about 20 tomorrow, northwesterly gales there from Sitkinak to Chignik, and then northerly small craft advisories for the remainder of the peninsula. And then the outlook for Saturday, pretty light wind conditions coming up here, more of a northeast direction, but barely a breeze for the Alaska Peninsula. Same thing for Bristol Bay. Starting out the day with small craft advisories here, but even these winds will be coming down to about 15 knots Saturday afternoon. Out in the Aleutians, mostly small craft advisory winds from the east here, but a little more northeasterly for the Fox Islands. And then southeasterly for Adak and Atka, about 25 knots. Look for gales, minimum gales out here towards Shimei and Attu. And looking ahead to Saturday, those winds, well, with that next low center coming northward in about this position, these winds over the far western areas will become northerly at about 20 knots with southeast winds. Of course, unless the low center decides to take a track farther north, farther to the west, then it'll be something different, but it looks like some gale force winds will come up into the Adak and Atka areas on Saturday, and southeast winds off to the east, and then pretty light wind day coming up for the Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, and Nikolsky areas, 10 to 15 knots. For the southwest coast, small craft advisories, mostly Nunivak Island and across Kuskokwim Bay. Northeast at about 15 for the Pribilofs, west 30 knots for the northern Bering Sea, lighter for St. Lawrence Island. And then for Saturday, high pressure right along the coast, light variable winds, light northeast breeze to the south, but those winds increasing here. St. Lawrence Island, probably not reaching gale force, they could, but 30 knots should cover it here, about 25 for the northern Bering Sea. Winds becoming north or southeast and increasing to 20 knots here for the Pribilofs. Up along the Arctic coast, light winds for the central areas. Still can see some westerlies up to 20 at times here for the far eastern stretch. And east at about 10 on the west side, southeast 15, Cape Lisburne, and light winds coming up for the Chukchi Sea. but then those should kick up to gale force on Saturday and into the afternoon Saturday here, right out of the south, right up across Cape Lismore and Point Hope and that marine area. Even gale force winds here probably to the southwest of Point Lay, and then lesser winds to about 20 knots for the central coast, and winds staying pretty light throughout much of the day Saturday here on the east side, but kind of swinging around to a southerly direction to southwest. And for tonight again, snow diminishing, but holding on here over the eastern interior. May see a couple more inches or less, especially along the upslope areas here. Another system rolls more rain, maybe some gusty winds into the southeast coast, especially tonight. Could see some possible gale force gusts here coming into those southern areas. Colder air behind this front resulting in snow showers out over the Gulf of Alaska. Gusty winds in the channeled areas of the coast up here in Prince William Sound. Of course, Resurrection Bay, Seward, Whittier, and those areas. Otherwise, the calm wind area is easily falling below zero here for south central Alaska, and the clear areas up here over the interior easily falling to 30, 35 below zero. High pressure over the Bering Sea. Watching for some of this activity to try to come over the top there, and probably will, mostly in the form of low clouds, fog, and flurries. Nothing in the way of any wind, just lower flying conditions. High pressure over the interior, the clouds and flurries slowly diminishing as the upper level low slides off to the southeast, and that's going to push an Arctic front into the central southeast coast tomorrow afternoon. So look for those winds to start increasing as early as that time. Lincoln Island, Glacier Bay, snow ending for the Yakutat area, as well as Kodiak Island. Just a chance as that thing slips through that area. And then on Saturday, high pressure, dry conditions, but strong winds developing for the northern southeast coast. A band of snow becomes rain over the southern areas. Diminishing winds here back across Bristol Bay. Good night.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
This week on Indie Alaska.
My name is